You know, one of the major headlines that we reported to you, in case you missed this, rapper Yak Gotti was stabbed inside the Fulton County Jail. Uh, so obviously, a lot of concern from his attorney about what happened on Sunday, but he has been back in the courtroom today as jury deliberations continue in the YSL RICO trial. It's the third day now of deliberations. Remember, the jury broke on Wednesday before Thanksgiving without having reached a verdict. They started deliberations on Tuesday. For a recap on what's been happening, here's my colleague Sarah Hammond.
Both the defense and the prosecution wrapped up their closing arguments just before 8 o'clock last night after almost an 11-hour day in court. But now the nationally watched YSL trial will soon be in the hands of the jury. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Paige Reese Whitaker did not officially charge the jury Monday night, but did say deliberations will begin today. And tomorrow marks 1 year since witness testimony began in the trial that initially included 28 defendants, including rapper Young Thug. They faced multiple organized crime, weapons, and drug-related charges. He ultimately took a plea deal, while others either took deals, had their cases severed, or dismissed altogether. Now, only 2 defendants remain, Shannon Stillwell and Kendrick.
They are guilty of every single count that they are both charged with.
The state has spent the past year with a hammer in their hand, banging on a square peg that they call evidence, trying so hard to fit that square peg into the round hole that they call their narrative.
Court will resume at 9:30 this morning, and the jury.
And obviously, court already did resume this morning. But, the jury now, again, in their third day of deliberations. Suri, oftentimes we see right before a holiday, deliberations will come down and that the case is just wrapped up. Were you surprised that this continued on into today? It's the third day now?
I was pleasantly surprised. I think that these juries taking their duty very seriously, and they
will
are
begin their deliberations
respecting the
at
rights of
11.
the defendants, and also all the effort that's been coming to putting this case together. Usually, it's a concerning thing when something's going to wrap up right before a holiday break. I think they got the case 2 days before Thanksgiving, and I was worried that they were just going to say, well, you know what, whatever, let's go home to our families. Everybody's guilty of everything. But clearly they didn't do that. They're looking at the evidence. They're asking very important questions, very relevant questions. It shows that they're talking to each other. They're deliberating. They're doing their job. So I'm happy, and I wish good luck to both Mr. Stillwell and Mr. Yak.
And you specifically are wishing luck to the defendants in this case. Not surprising, because you represented a defendant on this case. Can you tell us, just refresh our memories, who was your defendant that you represented and what happened?
Well, my client was Mr. Cordarius Dorsey. He was a young man that was accused of making a phone call. He was at a jail, and he called Obama, which is Mr. Antonio Sumlin, to complain about somebody. He was carrying it out. He was annoyed that somebody wasn't putting money in his books according to the supposed evidence of the state, and said that he was upset at this person. The receiver of the call never did anything about it. Nobody got hurt. Nobody even got stared at. So absolutely nothing happened. But according to the state, they claimed that that was a criminal attempt to commit a felony in furtherance of the gang endeavors or whatever. They charged him with a RICO charge. Ultimately, after 10 months of jury selection, the state decided to do the right thing and dismissed all charges against my client.
So initially, the indictment had more than 24 defendants listed, and then now we see that there are only 2 defendants remaining on this case. It's been really remarkable to just watch as a journalist how it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller after people got, some of the charges dismissed, some of the cases were severed, and there were plea deals reached. Is it unusual?
It's very unusual to try to go forward with this many defendants. I mean, the feds used to do it a long time ago, and then they realized that it was very inefficient and stopped doing it. There's just not a courtroom that can fit that many people. You just said that we're down to 2. We're not just down to 2. There's 2 left in this trial. I think there's still 8 young men sitting in jail. They'll be sitting in bedbug-ridden Rice Street for over 2 years now, waiting for their trial. because they couldn't get attorneys for them. They couldn't find enough public defenders to represent them. So those people are still waiting on the trial, and hopefully it's not going to be another 2-year trial for them. But this case is not going to be over anytime soon, especially not for those people that are still in custody in a very dangerous jail where, as you can see, Mr. Kendrick got stabbed over the weekend. And he's not the first one to get stabbed. I think it was Mr. Nichols that got stabbed last year around this time. It is a very dangerous place to be in. The people that are in charge of that jail just do not care about the well-being of the people being detained, even though it is their responsibility.
Do you think that defendants on high-profile cases like this actually are targets for crimes like stabbing in jail? I mean, we don't want to speculate as to what happened over the weekend, but does that kind of, put an X on your back?
It does. When somebody's a celebrity, when somebody's an attorneys sometimes go to jail too. When somebody is a cop, they are put into a separate wing of the jail, to say, for their own protection. For example, Mr. Williams, Jeffrey Williams, which is Young Thug, he wasn't housed at Rice Street. He was actually housed at Cobb County Jail Detention Center, meaning that Fulton County was paying Cobb to house one of their inmates, mostly for his security. But that's crazy to me, the fact that the jail cannot keep their own guests safe. I mean, they are put there against their will, and they cannot keep the weapons out of there. There's contraband cell phones, there's contraband food, there's drugs, and all of that stuff is mostly coming in through deputies.
Just looking at some of the footage that we were playing from the course of this trial, and specifically last week, we were looking at some of the surveillance footage of what prosecutors say is associated with drive-by shootings, one of those at a gas station. And that's something that the jury asked to re-watch last week. Some of that footage, and they, of course, had a couple questions about intent to distribute. What do you make of, the jury's questions, the fact that they've asked to re-watch video? Does it mean they're a really attentive jury? Does it mean that it's just been a really long trial and they're kind of confused?
Well, I think everybody's confused. I think the prosecution is confused about this case. But no, those questions were very important, especially because I believe, I'm speculating obviously, but I believe that they don't want to find Mr. Kendrick guilty of anything. What they saw in that video is that he was at a gas station near wherever the shooting happened, and he got into a completely different car. The car that is seen in the drive-by is not the car that Mr. Kendrick got in. So that, if anything, shows that he was not involved in the shooting whatsoever. Then the questions about whether or not, what is the definition of intent to distribute, and another very important question, they asked if the Richard Mille watch, which is a $500,000 watch that went missing after Investigator Viverito handled it, so this watch has not been found. It's worth $500,000. What they were asking is if Mr. Weinstein, Attorney Weinstein, said my client's watch or the watch. Obviously, if they think that it is Mr. Kendrick's watch, which is not, then they're going to say that that is his house and those are his drugs. I am hoping that it was clarified that the watch did not belong to him. The only point to raising this issue is to show the lack of credibility from Investigator Viverito, and not that Yak was living in that house, because he wasn't. He was just a guest. And just like if you invite me over to your house, I'm not going to start going through your drawers and your bedrooms and see how many drugs you're hiding. I'm just a guest, and that's not my house.
But, and that's pretty much what Doug Weinstein argued in closing arguments. Speaking of him, I got a chance to speak with him one-on-one and get an interview for our news station, and he said that Kendrick was feeling pretty confident. Do you think that, based on what you've seen in this trial, that the prospects are good, in terms of a not guilty for him? I'm
definitely hoping so, because all the evidence against him just goes to show mere presence. He happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think one of the worst things that I had against him is he was standing on top of some rapper's car. And that is just marketing. That is just part of social media. That's just part of getting likes and getting people interested in your music. It had nothing to do with making any threats. And obviously, that's all the best evidence they had. Him standing on somebody's car. I am hoping that the jury is going to say it's just not enough. They could not prove a racketeering charge beyond a reasonable doubt, and he should go home to his family.
I mean, and he's facing other charges apart from, violating RICO. He's also facing 1 count of murder, 1 count of participation in a criminal street gang, some other charges as well, but Stillwell is actually facing 2 counts of murder. So my question to you, I mean, what we're looking at with Stillwell seems to be a little more serious. Do you think that, the jury's gonna get him on something?
Sadly, I think that what may happen is that now that they're down to 2, they might want to, in their mind, try to be fair. Okay, we're going to find one not guilty, but somebody has to pay because something happened. I don't think there's been enough evidence to show that Mr. Stillwell was involved other than mere presence, being around these people, and an ongoing beef that was happening between these 2 groups. But I think that what Sharp did, Attorney Sharp, showed that, if anything, there's much stronger evidence pointing at somebody else. And the state's response to that was like, okay, well, yeah, maybe somebody else did it, but we don't have to prosecute everybody. We can still go just against these people, which is tremendously unfair. I mean, the evidence does point at somebody completely different that has never been sitting as a defendant, that has been just a witness to the state, and nothing was ever charged against that man. And I hope they don't, because, again, even the case against him is not strong enough. But it is stronger than against Stillwell. So I hope that the jury can see through that and say not guilty as well.
Well, it's just been interesting to see kind of this case unfold, or maybe some would say unravel, that we've seen it get smaller and smaller and smaller. Does that have any impact on the deliberations right now?
They have no idea what happened to the other defendants. I mean, we all know because we saw the pleas. And a lot of people keep saying that there was a negotiated plea with Mr. Williams. It wasn't. It was a non-negotiated. He did not accept the offer from the state and had to go blind before the judge. And the judge could see through it, could see how the case has been unraveling, and sentence him to less than what the state was asking, to just probation. And most of the other defendants have been sentenced to just probation, which means they're not that dangerous. If the offer was, you get to go home and you get to be free. The few people that are actually serving some prison time are the ones that refuse to cooperate with the state. So if you snitch, you go home. If not, you have to sit down for a while. And that's what the case is all about. But the jurors have no idea what happened. And that's what's scary. They could be speculating. They could be speculating that everybody turned against these 2 defendants and they must be the guilty ones. Or hopefully they'll see it for what it is, that all the other people are gone because there's no case and these people should be let go.
When is this jury going to come to a verdict? Frankly, I thought it was going to happen last week. It didn't happen. When do you think they're going to come up with a decision here?
Maybe they'll take at least a week. I mean, there
Really?
is a lot to talk about. And if at least one person in there is taking it seriously, they want to look at stuff. They want to look at evidence. They want to review their notes. They want to chit-chat with each other and say, well, what do you remember? What do you think? They don't get these instant replays that we see on YouTube all the time.
That's
what they
true.
get is their own notes and their own memories. They might be able to see videos and pictures, but they don't get to listen to the testimony again. That's what was very important for them to be paying attention. And from my understanding, they were.
Yeah.
It wasn't the type of jury that was just dozing off and thinking about what they're going to do over the weekend when they get to go home. They were actually listening to every witness, and hopefully that's what they're doing. They're talking to each other, and I think it's probably going to take about a week.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to remember they first started hearing witness testimony well over a year ago at this point. So, I guess it takes some time to go back through and refresh everything. Although, some might argue they may have already had their ideas formed over the course of this past year plus, but apparently they just want to really take their time and get it right.
Yeah. And hopefully they did have their ideas formed when they realized, okay, when the judge told them, remember this testimony you heard from this witness? Completely ignore all of that. And that happened at least 2 to 3 times. So if anything, hopefully that made up their mind that there's just not a good enough case to go forward.
All right. Of course, we're going to keep watch of what happens inside the courtroom there. And I want to let everybody know you can watch our gavel coverage here on our stream, ANF Plus. You can watch it on Roku, on Amazon Fire, Apple TV. You can watch it on YouTube. That's where I watch it a lot of times, on YouTube. But anyway, Suri Chadha Jimenez, former YSL case defense attorney, and when a verdict comes down, I know you're going to be with us and hopefully be able to break it down. And of course, we're going to bring that to our viewers. If you haven't done so yet, please download our free app and you can get updates sent right to your phone.